Alright, so make sure you've got the Hello World project open from the previous video and opened in your IDE. In my case, of course, we're using IntelliJ. And I'm just going to double click this Hello World.py tab to give us the full screen. I'm going to try and do that in the course, but you may or may not want to do that, depending on the amount of screen real estate you've got and whether you want to have the project pane open. So at the moment, we've got a very simple program that just prints out the text Hello World. There's a few important things to know about the code, and I've already mentioned that print is a function. When you call a function in Python, you provide the things you want to print inside parentheses. So we've provided a string literal hello world, and that's what got printed. A string literal is a sequence of characters, anything you can type on the keyboard, basically enclosed in quotes. You can use either a single quote or double quotes to enclose a string. I used single quotes, but you could use double quotes if you wanted to. It's important though to use the same ones though. So if you start a string with double quotes, then it has to be terminated with a double quote. So if I change my single quote on the end of hello world to a double quote, suddenly we've got an error there. You can't start with one style of quote and end with the other. You have to use the same type at the start and at the end. So I'm going to fix the error by just doing a Control-Z on my keyboard twice to undo the change and go back to what we had before, which was a single quote at the end. And if I run it again, we've got no errors and we're getting the same output we got in the previous video. So when you've done that for the first time, as we did in the previous video, then again just now, IntelliJ remembers which program you want to run. Now in the drop down on the menu in the right top of the screen, you can see it's going to run Hello World. It's showing us that, and you can use the green triangle icon just to the right of that drop down to run the same program again. So I can come over there and click on that. So as you work through the course, you'll have several files open at once. If you run them using this green triangle icon, check that you're running the program that you expect. I'll talk about it again later when we've got more than one file open. Alright, so you saw me use the green triangle to the right of the Hello World text there, the drop down to run the program again, and we got the same output as we did previously. Alright, so a bit more jargon now. The string literal Hello World is called an argument, at least in the context of what we're doing here. We're passing the argument to the print function. Functions can take more than one argument, and we'll be looking at how to define those when we write our own functions later in the course. So we're passing a string argument to the print function, but we could also print, for example, the result of calculations. So let's go ahead and add some calculations. So I'm going to press enter there. I'm going to type print left parentheses, adding the right one automatically, and in the parentheses I'm going to type 1 plus 2. Then on the next line I'm going to type print, add my parentheses, and add 7 multiplied by 6. On the next line I'm just going to type print and have left and right parentheses with nothing in there. Then on the line 5, the last one, I'm going to put print and parentheses again, double quotes this time. I'm going to type the end. Right, so let's run this. Let's move this up a little bit, the run window, so we can see the output. So you can see that now that we've done that, Python works out the result of our arithmetic expressions and it prints the answers. 1 plus 2 is obviously 3. 7 times 6 is obviously 42. Now print with left and right parentheses without telling Python what to print just produces a blank line, and you can see that blank line there. We still need the parentheses even though we're not providing an argument. When calling a function, you must have parentheses after the function name. And finally, the program finishes after we're printing the string the end. Functions often take a specific number of arguments, but it's also possible to write functions that can take a variable number of arguments. The print function that's built into Python has been written that way. What that means is we can print several things at once. So let's change the last line to print several strings and a number. So I'm going to put my cursor at the end of the double quote after the end. I'm going to put a comma there, double quotes, or is it? Question mark. I'm going to move on after the double quotes again, comma. I'm going to type keep watching to learn more about Python. And a double quote and comma, then a number 3, making sure that's all in our parentheses. If we run the program now, you can see now that we've got 3 strings and a number printed on that line. So each argument is separated from the previous one with a comma. we're passing 4 arguments on this line to print. So the first argument is the end, and that's followed by a comma to separate it from the second argument, or is it question mark. Once again, we need a comma before we provide the third argument. Keep watching to learn more about Python. And the final argument is the numeric literal 3, which is also separated from the previous argument with a comma. Alright, so there's still a few more things to learn about the print function, and I'll be coming back to it in later videos. For now, we've learnt enough to be able to print from our programs to check that they produce the correct results. So let's finish this video with a slide to summarise them. So a literal, well, that's a value of some type. An example of a numeric literal are the numbers 1, 42 and 98.04. And an example of a string literal are hello world, Gildo and Rossum and Python, all in quotes as you can see there. Moving on, a function. Well, that's a named block of code that we can call by using its name. We can write our own functions, or we can use functions that are built into Python, such as we've been doing here with the print function. In Python, all functions return a value. Argument, a value passed to a function in order to give it values to work with. Now, there may be no arguments, or there may be one or more. Arguments appear in parentheses after the function name. If there are no arguments, you still have to type in the left and right parentheses. Calling a function, using the function name to execute the function's code. When you call a function, you have to provide the arguments that the function expects. If it doesn't expect any arguments, don't put anything between the parentheses. Return value, well, that's the value that a function returns. We haven't talked about that yet, but it belongs in this slide to make the slide complete. So more on that later. And parameter, also called a formal parameter. This is something else we haven't discussed yet, and we'll learn about parameters when we start writing our own functions. Right, so let's end the video here, and the next one, we're going to start talking about strings. See you in the next video.